Right into it's the same type of thing, immigration. That there's a lot of people saying, the problem is the employers, the regulations telling them who they can hire and who they can't, and instead they're just hiring anybody who comes over and paying them under the table. And what can we do to deal with the immigration problem to legalize or get people into the system? I don't know if you want to call it amnesty or just how do we get these people into the system so they're all part of America and the melting pot like it used to be?
Yeah. Well, we have a tremendous problem. Immigration, and when we have to fix it, and I think it was too bad that this recent attempt fell by the wayside, in spite of everybody's, or not everybody's, but at least our senior senator's best efforts. But what you have going, what I would support is an earned path to citizenship. If you think of my husband, Paul, he was technically a first-generation American. His father came here when he was 3. So Paul was born here and rose to run for the presidency of the United States. It's a tremendous legacy of this. It's a tremendous legacy of this country, and it will always be so that we attract people from countries around this world where the opportunities are not what they're here today. And the other piece of it was that the fundamental building block of Paul's family was access to education, because his grandfather was not an educated man, and yet all of his children went on to college, his daughters as well as his sons. And then obviously Paul did, and as did his sister. So we will always have that legacy and that opportunity. That being said, we have 12 million undocumented workers here, and I believe, and I would support creating an earned path to citizenship. They're here, they've lived here. There was a very sad story today in the Globe about a young man who came here as an asylee from, I think, Kenya, married. Had, I think, quadruplets, is that what we would call it? A big family.
It works with me.
A big family, and yet has not been able, they're sending him back, they're deporting him because the situation in Kenya has resolved itself, so the status under which he's here no longer allows him to stay. But his wife is an American citizen. That's insufficient, to keep him here. So we have to create an earned path to citizenship. We have to address family unification, keeping the nuclear family intact. We have to balance some competing interests around leveling the playing field for the American worker. You don't really want to disadvantage the American worker, and yet recognizing that.
Not to mention the people following the process in foreign countries trying to get here legally.
Right, and that whole, but also, recognizing that employers can't always fill all the jobs they have with those who are here. I think we have to, the issue of national security is a grave one. We need to know who's coming in, who's staying, and who's leaving. So all of these competing interests, and I think we have to have some mechanism for holding employers accountable who don't observe the laws, but I think it should be a fair system, not an egregious one as you see being put in place in some parts of this country. So as we go forward, we're going to have to find a way to balance all those interests.
I understand it does seem cruel from the outside looking in when that happens, but how would you go after a company that's doing it illegally and you find out they're running a sweatshop? And
I think you have to enforce. Oh yeah, you absolutely do. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about somebody who's observing all the laws, workplace laws and all of that. I'm talking about somebody who just, just is brought in lots of people who are here illegally without particularly paying attention to their status, and has in place all the appropriate workplace standards. But when someone's not observing all those laws, that's quite a different thing.
Right.
Yeah, quite a different thing.
What about the wall and the borders? What do we do to secure the borders? Are you into that? Put a big fence up on the Mexican border?
Well, it was a trade-off that Senator Kennedy was willing to make as this legislation went forward, because in order to get the support of those countries that are, bordering Mexico or whatever, it was something that people felt strongly about. I've always been skeptical as to its cost and whether it could work, and yet I don't live there. I don't live down there, and I'm not privy to the daily dynamics.
Yeah, it's hard to envision what they're dealing with.
What goes on. Yeah. To me, the important piece is
down there is suffering so badly.
Yeah, I just don't. It's almost like a place you'd have to visit to really get a handle on. But on the other hand, I think we need to have some identification process for bringing people in and knowing who's coming in, why they're coming in, where they're heading.
We really need an identification process across the whole country, like most countries in the world do.
Yeah, I'm not there yet, but if there's some way we could do it short of that, I think we should look at it.